This tutorial is going to cover how to create exciting text within CorelDRAW. Let's dive right in and grab our text tool. There are several ways to use the text tool. The first, most common way would be simply to click once on your page, which will give you a cursor. Then you can just type out what you want. The other way to use the text tool is to click and drag to make a text box. Then you can fill this with text. You would use this first way when you're typing out just one or two words, and you would use the paragraph text if you're typing out a bunch of text like a paragraph. With this one, we can size up or down and it changes the size of the font. However, if we size our paragraph up and down, the font size remains the same, it just adjusts how the text fits into the space. We're going to spend most of our time with this first method. Let's go ahead and choose a different font, something exciting. You can size your font up here by choosing from the drop-down menu, or you can even manually type in the size font you want. You can also just simply drag the corner black square with your pick tool to size it up or down. Do not size your font using the side squares or the top and bottom squares, as it will distort your font. Don't do it. It's like waving a big flag that says, I don't know what I'm doing in design. We want all of your customers to assume that you are an expert. If you really need to stretch a text like this out a little bit, we would actually do it by adjusting the spacing in between the letters by using our shape tool. I will get this arrow symbol here on the bottom right corner, and if I drag that out, you can see that I can stretch it out without distorting any of my individual letters. Now let's add some pizzazz to this line of text. To add an arc, we will use our envelope tool. The envelope tool is underneath the drop shadow or blend tool, depending on which version of Corel you are using. The envelope tool will add this blue dotted line around your text. Up in your property bar, we have some settings. Let's switch to the single arc mode. Now if I pull up the center blue square, it will add a beautiful arc to the top of my text. If I do that while holding the shift button down on my keyboard, it will move the top and the bottom in opposite directions. And if I do the same thing while holding down my control button, I get a traditional arc just like that. Don't arc it too high, as the sized letters will get distorted. This is the most common way I use the envelope tool, but there are many other ways to use it. Let's go ahead and make another line of text here. And this time I'm just going to copy and paste it a bunch of times. Go back to our envelope tool. There is a straight line mode. In X7 it defaults on this. In earlier versions I believe it will default on the unconstrained mode. This will make my line straight, so you can see as I pull my nodes here, the lines are perfectly straight. The shift and control button work in the same way that they did before. I also have the double arc right here. It's the double arc mode. This kind of reminds me of a roller coaster. I don't use this one very often. And then I also have the unconstrained mode. This allows me to move these nodes around in any way I want organically. This is really, really handy if I need to fit my text into a specific space. So I'm going to go back to single arc mode with this one to show you another way to use it. I have this straight line of text, and I'm going to stretch it up really tall. And then I add an envelope to it, change it to a single arc mode, and then I move my center bottom node up. That will give me this text, which is straight on top with a nice arc on the bottom. Very simple to do, but creates a lot of visual impact. All right, let's get rid of all this other junk. Let's go back to our one line of text. There is another way to arc a line of text, and that is to put text on a circle. So I have the same line of text here, and I'm also going to make a circle. If you have the Action Illustrated Instant Designer, which is this row of buttons right here, you do have a tool that's called Text on a Circle. All I need to do to activate it, because you can see it's grayed out right now, is to have a line of text and a circle selected at the same time. Then my icon becomes available. And I can select outside top, outside bottom, inside bottom. I'm just going to keep it on outside top and hit OK. And that puts my text on a circle. To separate the text from the circle, all I do is go up to Object and break text apart. And then I could remove my circle out from underneath it. If you don't have the Instant Designer, it's still pretty simple. I just have my line of text here. And then I'm going to right click and drag it over to my circle until I get this bullseye symbol. Let go and you get a list of options, one of which is Fit Text to Path. That will put my text on top of the circle. If I want the text on the bottom, I can actually, with my pick tool, drag my text down to the bottom. Right now it's actually upside down and backwards, so I'm going to mirror it horizontally and I'm going to mirror it vertically. And then I will just drag this down again to the outside. You can see that my letters are really close together, and that's where I would use my shape tool again to adjust the spacing between the letters. Just drag this out until it's going to look better. So that's how you can put text on a circle using the Instant Designer or just using Corel. You can see the difference between using the envelope and putting it on a circle. They're both great. I tend to use the envelope most often. However, I definitely use text on a circle if I have a long line of text or if I'm recreating a circular seal of some kind. There's still one more way to use text, and that is to fill an object with text. Let me go ahead and make a new page. I'm going to go ahead and type out a 16, and we're going to put names inside of these letters here, like for a graduating class. I'm going to go ahead and break them apart so that each object is individual, and then I'm going to go ahead and convert them both to curves. This is just removing all of the text properties from them, and they're now objects. Let's go ahead and make them white with black outlines. Let me grab my text tool. When I come over to my object, I get a symbol that looks like an A with a curve on it. If I click then, I can actually put text around my object. Let's go ahead and undo that. If I come just inside of that, I get a symbol that looks like an A, B inside of a rectangle. If I come too far in, I lose it. So it's just inside. Click. Then it actually adds a paragraph inside of my object. This is where I could type out names. Ideally, you would have received a file from your client that has all the names in it, and in that case you would just be able to copy and paste them into here. we would want to make the font size small. Let me make sure I get all of it. You would have more names than this, obviously. And then you would also set your justify to force justify. And this is how you could put names inside of text. After you've added all the names in both the letters, you would just size it correctly so that it fills up perfectly. This dotted line here will not be printed. It's just CorelDRAW showing you that the paragraph text exists. So that's how you can use the fill option of your text tool. Let's go back to our other line of text here. Let's go ahead and make this line of text more exciting. I have this selected, and if I just right click on a color from my palette, it's going to go ahead and add an outline, and then I can double click on my pen outline color to open up the outline pen property bar. Let me go ahead and make it thicker. I'm going to go ahead and keep my corners at square since I'm working with a nice and rigid font. If I were working with a softer font or especially a cursive, I would go ahead and change my line caps and curves to rounded. I'm also going to go ahead and select behind fill and scale with image, and we're at an 8-point width. So the way that outlines work is that the outlines are always set to centered. This is true in any version older than X6, so that's why I'm going to go over this. In X7, it turns out that you can actually change the position of your outline, but for the purposes of showing you how all other versions work, it's always going to be set at centered. So what that means is that this is an 8-point outline, but it means that 4 points go out from this vector line, but also 4 points are going to go inside the vector line, which makes it a full 8-point outline. If I don't select behind fill, the outline actually comes on top of that, and then it ends up making my text look different. That's why 99% of the time I will select behind fill. Now the scale with object means that this is an 8-point outline, and so if I set it to scale with object, I can make this larger or smaller, and the outline remains proportional to my text. If I open this up, you can see it's no longer an 8-point outline because I've made it larger, so it adjusted it proportionally to scale it to a 9-point outline. Let's go back. If I don't have scale with object selected, it's going to keep the 8-point outline no matter what size I make this. So if I make this small, all of a sudden my outline looks huge proportionally, and that's because it's still an 8-point outline. And so for me, I tend to always have scale with objects selected, because when I add an outline to text, I'm making the width based on how it looks compared to the text. And then at the last minute, if I needed to resize my design slightly, it wouldn't change the look of my design. So let's go ahead and make a double outline, which is super easy. I'm just going to copy and paste my text, so I actually have two on top of each other. And I'm going to go ahead and make one of the outlines a different color, and I'm going to make it considerably larger. And then I'm just going to take this and I'm going to go ahead and put it behind my other objects. You can tell that I'm using my shortcuts, my keyboard shortcuts. I would of course be able to move this behind everything by coming to order and moving it to back of page. So now I have a double outline. Let's go ahead then and add a shadow to it as well. There are two ways that I would add a shadow onto this depending on how I'm printing. If I am doing sublimation or direct to garment, I can use my drop shadow tool, which is the same place where the envelope is, where I just go ahead and click and drag it downwards. There we go. And you can see that I have a shadow here. And I can adjust all my settings up here, the transparency, the feathering. However, if I'm doing vinyl cutting or screen printing, I tend to do my outlines or my shadows in a different way. I'm actually just going to take my larger outline here, which is the black one, and I can tell I'm selected on it because down here it shows me that I'm selected on a black fill object with a black outline. Copy and paste it so I have a second one, and I'm just going to go ahead and make it a gray fill with a gray outline. Move it slightly down into the bottom and move it behind everything, and so now it has a drop shadow. So those are the two ways to make a shadow. Depending on how you're printing, you would choose one over the other. The last thing I'm going to do to make this a little bit more exciting is I'm actually going to go ahead and add a gradient onto this with my interactive fill tool. Just drag it across my design and it adds the fountain fill. I can adjust the angle to however I want it to look. Now I'm going to grab my freehand tool and I'm actually going to make a squiggly shape across my text, bring it around to make it a closed shape. Then I'm going to copy and paste my top line of text with the gradient on it. So I have two of them. I'm going to remove the outline from the top one, so I have this top one has no outline on it. And then I use my freehand shape to trim away that top line of text. Let's go ahead and hit trim. Let me go ahead and delete my freehand shape now. So now I have half of a line of text on top of a full line of text. If I adjust my gradients here, you can see that it gives it a lot of interest to my design, and it really doesn't take long. So it makes this cool kind of watery or metallic look to it that looks difficult but is actually really easy. So now you can see that in a couple minutes you can actually make really exciting text. Add an envelope, a double outline, a shadow, some cool fill techniques. You could also fill the text with texture like tiger stripes. That will be covered in the tutorial about power clipping, so make sure to check that out. The last thing I'm going to do is make text with a tail. Let me type out my text and choose a cursive font. You'll notice this time I did not do all caps. And when you're doing cursive fonts, you won't want to because it makes them less legible. You just want to make sure that you choose a font where the last letter is going to loop up. This font is called Dolly Script. I actually got it for free on dafont.com. This is a great website where you can actually access a bunch of free fonts, and I have a lot of luck finding good, fun fonts to use on that website. Now I'm going to go ahead and import in a vector tail. I'm going to use one from the Action Illustrated collection. This could come from anywhere though. And I'm just going to place it underneath my text and then size it appropriately so it kind of matches up here. And then I'm going to use my shape tool to grab my nodes. And I'm going to make it line up to match with the bottom of my N, or the way it loops up here. This is why it's really important to know how to manipulate your shapes inside of Corel, because it gives you so much more control. So we just want to make sure that it looks like my N is looping up into this. And then of course I would want these to be the same color. It looks like right now they're different shades of black. If I'm printing this design, I don't need to go any further than this. However, if I'm going to be vinyl cutting, I would need to weld the words to the tail. If we take a look at this in wireframe, you can see I have a bunch of overlapping shapes, so I can just click on both of these and weld them together, and that will solve our problem. So that's an overview of how to create exciting text within CorelDRAW.